We'll go live then.
No problem.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Bitter Pill. So a few days ago, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's in a district in New York City, was confronted by a couple of protesters who live there in the city, although not in her district. But I think we should be able to protest anybody anywhere if they're in Congress. But anyway, they protested her regarding her votes, along with all the other Democratic members of Congress, to keep sending weapons to Ukraine and backing the U.S. proxy war with Russia. And I have these two gentlemen who conducted the protests, Kynan Thistlethwaite and Jose Vega, with me tonight to discuss their protests, which there's been more than one that they've done, and other people's protests, largely against the so-called progressives in Congress, who have been just as much on board with the war in Ukraine, if not more so, than other members of Congress. Talk about reactions that there have been to their protests, and the general issue of the war in Ukraine and how fucked up that and other aspects of U.S. foreign policy are. And then also a curious recent development was this letter that was sent out by the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the squad, and so on and so forth, where they basically were, and we can get into details of this, but basically what they said, was we think it's great that we're funding this war in Ukraine and blah, 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 and those terrible Russian imperialists need to be stopped and all this, but we really think maybe pretty please you should engage in a little diplomacy too. And then 24 hours later, they retracted the letter and said, "Oh, we're sorry, we didn't mean to offend anybody." So we'll talk about all of that and more. So I guess maybe to start with, you guys want to just introduce yourselves and say whatever about your political activism and what motivated you to protest AOC and whatever else.
Yeah, go Kynan. Kynan was the first one to intervene, so he should be the first one to introduce himself.
All right, sure. Go Kynan.
Yeah, well, thank you, Jeff, for interviewing us. I'm happy to be here along with you guys. I'm Kynan. I've been involved with the Schiller Institute as a political organizer in Diane Sayers' campaign, who is now running as an independent candidate against Chuck Schumer. I've been politically active for maybe 3 years, not too long. I'm only 20, but yeah, I had went to this town hall. Jose had told me about it. I was originally scheduled to work that day. And Jose kind of made me feel guilty about not going. So I'm like, all right, you know what? I'll just call off of work. I'll make an excuse. And it turns out I made the right decision. So that's a little bit of my background.
Well, I've been a LaRouche activist since I was about 15 years old, 15, 16. And I've done that ever since. And here I am now, a staffer for Diane Sayers' campaign. Yeah, that's it. That's who I am. That's me.
Okay. So, Jose, you had protested was it Bowman? You protested before you protested AOC, and were there any other protests about the war in Ukraine by you guys or anybody else in the area before that, or?
Well, chronologically, before everything, even before the Russian invasion, I don't even know if I should call it an invasion, excuse me, but before the Russian-Ukrainian war started in October last year, actually the 23rd of October. So
today
is like a year and 4 days. I had confronted Kamala Harris.
So, cool.
You can do better. And there's a picture of me, which is where I get my Twitter cover photo from. Yeah. And my ex-girlfriend got me this frame. So it's the only good thing out of that relationship. But but anyway, I had confronted Kamala Harris because, for one, she was coming into the city to talk about Build Back Better at a moment when in the city 8 people had drowned because they had flooding in their basement. you know, because of the hurricane Irene, I think it was.
Yeah.
So the
Ida.
hurricane Ida, excuse me, a Hurricane Ida came, and then people who were living in illegal basement apartments, which the city knows is illegal, but they legally also can't kick people out of them because then they legally can't make people homeless. They knew that the basement apartments were in flood zones, and they never did anything about it. And so 8 people drowned because they couldn't get out of their apartment in time. And,
Wow.
you know, and so I went to yell at her. But yeah, that's one. And then, yes, I yelled at Bowman a couple weeks before I did the AOC intervention. People saw that video. It was covered on Jimmy Dore's show. It didn't have the same impact that the AOC thing did, but it's still important, you know, that it happened, you know. Yeah. So, and then AOC.
Yeah. So I guess one question that people, well, there's a lot of questions people might have, but certainly one of them is why AOC, why Bowman, why, you know, the squad, you know, these, you know, so-called progressives in general. And then I guess related to that, you know, their perspective is, you know, Russia is the one that invaded Ukraine. You know, it's Putin's imperialist project, as AOC put it, or something to that effect. And the way for there to be peace is for Russia to get out. There's no reason for the U.S. to engage in diplomacy. So, you know, what's wrong with that narrative? And also, you know, like why target the squad? I mean, we know, but, you know, other people might not.
Yeah, I could start. I mean, I think Jose and I have the general view that, you know, anyone that's supporting this war drive, I mean, currently I mean, we can all agree that this is the most tenuous moment, I think, in human history, and much worse than the Cuban Missile Crisis now that we don't even have back channels to negotiate with Russia. So regardless of who it is, whether they're Republicans, Democrats, so-called progressives, I think they just need to be held accountable. And we just found out about this town hall, and AOC, you know, she made a point in her election campaign originally about being anti-war. Yet, what has she been doing? She's been supporting the funding to Ukraine. She's been, you know, she's supported allocating billions of dollars to send weapons there. So she should be called out on it, as Bowman and other people. So, I mean, that's why I think they should be called out. It could be anyone. But I think what's wrong with the narrative that she put out in response to what we did, I mean, she's ignoring so much of the history that's happened before the war even started, before February. You know, Putin had made the call in December 2021. Listen, we have certain red lines. You're basically putting a knife to our throat and expanding NATO to our borders. You know, Zelensky had made the call previously about having nuclear weapons there. So it should be obvious that, so it should be obvious to anyone that's paying attention that Putin was not unprovoked. You know, he was provoked to actually launch the special military operation. And, you know, that's just one fact that AOC is ignoring. But go back even further, go back to the 90s when the Soviet Union had collapsed. And when we had made the promise to Gorbachev that NATO is not going to expand 1 inch eastward. And here you see all the countries of the Warsaw Pact formerly are now a part of NATO. So, you know, what's up with that? And there's the coup that happened in 2014, launched by the Obama administration. There's the famous phone call with Victoria Nuland and Jeffrey Piot, I think, saying, you know, basically talking about who they're going to replace. They launched the coup against Yanukovych, and they installed neo-Nazis there, neo-Nazis that have been terrorizing the population in the Donbass for about 8 years now since that coup happened. So,
and to be clear, that the guy that they installed was someone who was far right, but not officially a Nazi, because they wanted kind of a fig leaf. And the same was true with Poroshenko. And, you know, I guess it's even more true, obviously, with Zelensky, because he's Jewish. But, you know, of course, he does whatever the Nazis tell him to do. But also, just to go back to the 90s for a second, another thing that people don't take into consideration is that the US was directly intervening in Russia's affairs throughout the 90s after the breakup of the Soviet Union. They even had a cover of Time magazine where they openly admitted that the US rigged Russia's presidential election so Yeltsin would win. It was openly admitted. And so, to think that Russia wouldn't be paranoid about the U.S. trying to, regime change in Russia is just, it's crazy. So
yeah, I just to answer that question on like why these progressive socialists, why AOC and Bowman and them, Kynan said it. They ran on this promise to be anti-war, but the thing is, there is a difference between confronting them and confronting like the most open neocon war hawk like Lindsey Graham, right? See, because Lindsey Graham doesn't hide the fact that he probably knows that there are neo-Nazis there because he's gone to Ukraine. He's been in Ukraine in 2014, 15, 16 with John McCain, right?
And so Biden.
And Joe Biden, yeah. And which, by the way, Joe Biden is seen shaking hands with like Oleg Tyanibok, the guy who started the Svoboda political party, the National Socialist Party of Ukraine. Okay, and then they have this youth group called the C14 group, which is based off these 14 words from Mein Kampf. We must protect the Aryan race or something like that. But anyway, so you could go after Lindsey Graham. It's like and people should, by the way, if you're in his district, you gotta go yell at him for supporting this stupid war, right? But the thing is, it's like that guy's not gonna hide the fact that he's proud of all the money he's sending to Ukraine. And he doesn't really care about you. But these progressive socialists, I believe that at some point in their lives, they really thought they were going to do something unique, and they were going to be revolutionary, and they were going to be, the life-changing, the radical-changing politicians that they thought they were going to be. And so, when they actually got a little power, they probably just got corrupted. Because then they were hit, I don't know what it's like to be in power, and to think like, you're going to do change just because you get into office. At the end of the day, you are one congressman. Yeah. Maybe they thought in their minds like, okay, maybe I do need to play this corruption game just a little bit. Maybe I just need to do something, in order to get the change I want. And over time, they just got beat down and wear down to the point where they kind of lost themselves. And so, I've made this point several times now that when they look at somebody like Kynan and I coming at them, demanding that they do something, they don't see us, they see themselves. They see the ghosts of their former selves. Mm-hmm. And what we're trying to do is induce that to come out. And for them to act human for once, to realize that we are on the verge of thermonuclear war. Yeah. And it is, our responsibility to induce these politicians who may not be any good to do something good for once because they're human. Yeah. And that's also true for all the senior senators and congressmen, but it's easier with the younger guys because they aren't so entrenched there yet. They still could, if they wanted to, if they had a conscience, pull out of the Democratic Party or something radical like that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard. I don't really know much about the background of the other folks besides AOC and Bernie Sanders. But I know at least in his younger years, Bernie Sanders was quite radical in the 60s and early 70s. And then, he got into politics and that gradually kind of got watered down, even though he nominally was independent of the Democratic Party when he came into Congress in the early 90s. He kind of made a pact with the Democrats where he was going to maintain his independent status and the Democrats wouldn't challenge him, but he would basically act like a Democrat, which is what he did, So, he was pretty sold out right from the beginning. He voted for sanctions and bombing in Iraq and supported the Yugoslavia war and tried to dump toxic waste on Vermont's nuclear waste on brown people in Texas and so on and so forth. And then AOC, it's hard to say because she did an interview where she talked about how basically the only way to make change is to do what you guys did and raise a ruckus and make people uncomfortable. I think one of you quoted her on your Twitter feed saying just that. And yet, before she even got elected, she was praising John McCain and all this stuff. So I don't know. But yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I think one important point I'd like to just make and make sure it's out there is that, like, look, that letter they put out was fucking terrible, just to be completely honest with you. But it was a step, albeit a baby step, a step in the right direction, because, and it also shows their impotence, that, like, in order for them to oppose the current strategy, right, that puts us on the brink of thermonuclear war, in order for them to have this collective voice, remember, that's like 30 congressmen, right? That's a good chunk of change of congressmen.
Yeah. Yep.
In order for them to just even be slightly critical of Biden, okay, they had to just ask his so hard and just be like, we could just do just a little more diplomacy. And then not even that. It wasn't like they were saying, like, we are calling for an immediate stopping of the funding to Ukraine. We are calling for the immediate support unless you do peace talks next week or something. And they could have done something like that. They could have done something radical. They didn't. They did the absolute bare minimum.
Yes.
And the reason they retracted it is not necessarily because of the backlash they got from the public. Somebody told them, no, you do not get to speak out like this against the current war. And we have to figure out who's the person who spanked them, okay, from putting out that letter. That is who you need to really point the fingers at. Because, like, look, yes, you should give the people who retracted their letters, shit for it, because at the end of the day, they were cowards. But who's the one telling them they couldn't do that? And what were they threatening them with so much that they had to push back on that letter? That's, I think, what matters more than the people who retracted the letter.
Yeah. And you have to wonder the same thing about Bernie Sanders, how he got cheated out of the nomination big time in 2016. And,
I know.
2020, he kind of sabotaged himself, but he was also cheated that time. He didn't say a damn thing. What did they threaten him with? I don't know.
Yeah, right. You're talking about, like, the 2016 election where like, or the 2016 election, right, where Hillary's emails, it was leaked that her campaign was actively working against Bernie's by putting out, like, all these lies about him so that people wouldn't vote for him in New York and other blue places. Yeah. And then he still campaigned for her. He could have done something else, but you're right about that.
Yeah. Even Tulsi Gabbard, she's to this day been so outspoken about U.S. foreign policy, and yet at the end of her campaign, it was still between Bernie and Joe Biden, and she, endorsed Biden and kissed his ass, and didn't say a thing about all these allegations that had just come out about Biden's sexual misconduct, and what the hell happened with her?
I don't know. I'm not going to try and speculate on, like, behind the scenes politics, because, I don't know how that works. I mean, and maybe I'm blessed to know how the swamp doesn't work. Maybe it's a good thing. I don't know how they, do all these dirty political, if you do this for us, then we'll do this for you. Maybe we'll give your campaign more funding. I don't know. The whole thing is morally compromised, and people don't make laws or pass things or do decisions in politics because of some moral compass they have. It's probably just like, hey, we've got lunch at 1, but I've got to pass this stupid bill. Let's flip a coin and go yes or no sometime, I don't know. But.
Who knows? I've actually got their letter, as well as the retraction, and also AOC's comments about you guys called up. Do you want to actually show folks those? And
go ahead. I just made you a co-host, so you can share your screen if you want. Yeah,
all right.
You do that, I'm going to go get a bottle of water.
Okay. Let's see here. Where'd it go?
Do you know how to do the thing, the share screen?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out Brave browser. Okay, what's showing right now? Is the letter showing or is something else showing?
We can't see anything.
Yeah, no, it doesn't say you're sharing anything right now.
Oh, okay. All right. Here we go.
There we go. Let's see here.
Yeah.
Now I see the letter. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, dear Mr. President, we write with appreciation for your commitment to Ukraine's legitimate struggle against Russia's war of aggression. Your support for the self-defense of an independent, sovereign, and democratic state has been supported by Congress, including through blah, blah, blah. Your administration's policy was critical to enable the Ukrainian people, through their courageous fighting and heroic sacrifices, to deal a historic military defeat to Russia, forcing Russia to dramatically scale back the stated goals of the invasion. I mean, I don't know if we even want to go any further because this first paragraph is just complete bullshit. It's like, I guess the thing that really jumps out to me, and also with the so-called socialists like Hallie Hawkins, who are supporting the Ukraine proxy war and NATO sending weapons to Ukraine and all that, is just they're treating Ukraine as this monolith, like the Ukrainian people and Ukraine's struggle against Russia's war of aggression. And it's like, well, wait a minute. You had the legitimate government of Ukraine overthrown in 2014 in a U.S.-backed coup where you had these oligarchs like Kolomoisky, who both funded Zelensky's campaign in 2019 and funded the Azov Battalion, one of the best known of the neo-Nazi groups, and you've got people in largely in eastern Ukraine, the more Russian-speaking faction of the population, very much against the 2014 coup government from the beginning because it brought to power people who fucking hate Russians. And so they they asked for autonomy, and then, the whole civil war started. And, like one thing that evidently people like AOC don't know is there have been, there were 14,000 people killed in the Donbass region in eastern Ukraine before all of this started in February. And, they've only got like 3 million people. So that's a fucking genocide.
Yeah, of course.
Nobody's talking about it. But and then this stuff about a military defeat to Russia, forcing Russia to dramatically scale back the stated goals of the invasion. What the fuck are they even talking about? Like, Russia's. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. You're good. I mean, I guess you have a section of the population that believes that this all began out of nowhere in February of this year.
Yeah.
And then you have the people who understand that, well, this actually started in 2014 with the Maidan coup. But I don't know. The problem is,
which faction do you think that AOC and the like are in, or do you have any thoughts on that?
I genuinely think that these people are just misinformed on the part of it. I mean, these people have aides that do a lot of the work for them, and you look at like what these people ran for Congress on, right? It's very domestic based issues,
right? Yeah.
So I wouldn't expect them to know what's happening in Russia, and I think that's also kind of a problem with how we govern and who we decide to elect, because I guess it comes down to like, what do you think a leader is supposed to do? If you think a leader is supposed to just fulfill one part here, like people say like, oh, well, we got to vote for her because she's pro Medicare for all. It's like, oh, I like Medicare for all too, but then what?
Yeah.
Like what then? Like, who are you really? And I think that the kind of issue here is like, what defines real leadership? But I think an even more pressing thing is like, see, it doesn't matter who's in power right now, because what are we like about a week and a half away 11 days away, 12 days away from midterms. What that means is that we might not make it to midterms. Let's just be completely honest here. We ain't got time to wait for the elections and pray to God that somebody else takes up all these seats or not. The issue is to induce the change right now.
Yeah.
Because like I and I don't know, Kynan, if you know the answer to this or not, but like, did Dr. King ever say this person needs to be removed from office in order for us to move forward?
Well, I don't think he did, because I think he understood that he had to take leadership himself, And what you see now with this retracted statement, I think it shows that we can't rely upon our representatives anymore, because there's a lack of leadership. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, the government is just completely morally bankrupt. And until people actually stand up, do things like what we just did with interventions, or demand that the right policies be incorporated, yeah, who knows if we're even going to be alive this winter. So, and it makes me think back to the famous quote by Franklin. It was after, I think, the Constitutional Convention, and a woman came out and asked, "So what's going on now? Are we a republic?" And I
No, it
think
wasn't just
Franklin
that
just
woman. It was a young Black woman. Okay.
oh, yeah. And his response to her was, "Yes, if you can keep it." So we're obliged to keep that republic now. That's at stake, and the entire world is at stake.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I see it too. I ain't got time to start diselecting people, because man, and also Senator Richard Black, he's a former state senator, former colonel, out in Virginia. He's a good guy. He's one of the only few Republicans I'll ever listen to.
Yeah.
But he said, like, he would not be surprised if there's some kind of surprise between now and the elections that puts us into some kind of martial law order where we have to suspend the election until it gets all resolved, because these people are so desperate to cling on. See, the thing is, you have to look at it also from the economic standpoint, because the inflation drive, the gas price drive, the cost to produce these things that people need every day is going way up. And yes, it is tied to the Ukrainian war, but the Ukrainian war is being used as a cover-up for the collapse of the financial system, because the speculative economy that we live in now is going to collapse.
Right.
And
almost did in 2008.
Yeah, that's right. And then they did this thing, they propped it up in 2008. You're living in a zombie economy now, because they did this bailout of trillions of dollars, and then they did it again for the pandemic. It's like a Frankenstein economy. It's just going to collapse. And so the question, and the way the Ukrainian war is tied into all of it, is that they're trying desperately to keep this Mickey Mouse system that Ray McGovern calls, the military-industrial complex system, alive through the Ukrainian war. And for one, the Russians are kicking ass. Like, that's one issue, right? Is that the Russians are able to kick back the asses of the Ukrainian army. And I think
with one hand tied behind their back. I mean, they've taken 20% of Ukraine's territory, which, I mean, the people here don't want it to be Ukraine's territory. They voted to join Russia. With only like 100,000 troops there, and now they're sending 300,000 plus more. I mean, how anybody could think that Ukraine is winning or Ukraine is gonna win is just beyond me. They're not living in reality.
Yeah, exactly. So, go ahead, Kynan.
And they're failing to win with over billions of dollars of support from Western countries. Know, so yeah,
which
I mean,
they don't have to give anymore.
Exactly. It's insane to actually think that they actually stand a chance, which is why we need to go for this negotiated settlement now. But I think we should also think in terms of what the future is going to be like, not after the ceasefire, because so many people are calling for it. But Helga Zepp-LaRouche, who's a co-founder of the Schiller Institute, which Jose and I are a part of, she's made an emphasis, and we actually had a conference on this today with officials from Latin America and other countries on the need for a new security architecture for the world and what that would be like, because nations need to be put on an equal footing. It can't just be the United States, Britain, and other powers that dictating to the rest of the world what their future is going to be like. But the global South is now playing an increasing role with organizations like the BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So they need to be put on an equal footing. And the new name for peace has to be economic development. There's no reason we need to have poverty right now in the 21st century. There's no reasons that nations lack modern healthcare systems. They lack development. So if we're going to come off of this world, we need to have a future for the rest of the world as well. And that's what she envisions. Us working together with China, working together with Russia, working with the Belt and Road Initiative, for example, which is making tremendous progress in places like Africa, where I think Ethiopia is going to have the first high-speed rail network in the African continent. So that's just amazing. So that's the kind of projects we should be working on, after we conclude a peace treaty for this war and get off the brink of nuclear war.
Yeah. And the Western media and politicians like to say, well, the whole world is behind us with this Russia-Ukraine war. And it's like, well, no, they're not. Your allies may be, but that's like, less than a quarter of the world's people and countries. And meanwhile, Ukraine put forward this resolution in the UN in August, I forget what it said, but basically, condemning the Russian military action, and they got their ass kicked. It was like, 80% voted against it. And it's like, well, gee, how is it a surprise to you that, all these countries are not supporting you when you're acting like the big bully on the block, and anybody does anything you don't like, you kick sand on their face, which amounts to invading them or rigging their elections or imposing economic sanctions on them or whatever. And meanwhile, China's like, let's make a deal. We'll do this for you, and you can do this for us, or it'll help us in this way. And they do business in ways that are mutually beneficial. And as a result, assuming we don't all get blown up in a nuclear war in the long run, they're winning, and the multipolar world vision in general is winning. But in the meantime, we've got to get through this very dangerous moment.
Yeah, no, I agree. I would just say, people should be standing up every day. That's it. I don't know if you saw the latest protest we did with Ayanna Pressley and Elizabeth Warren. Yeah.
They just kind of ignored protesters. It was kind of maddening.
I had clipped a section of the video. There's a meme that I have put out. I wonder if I can actually pull it up here. Maybe I can.
Okay. You want me to stop sharing the screen here?
Yeah, sure. No problem. I think I can pull it up. Oh, yeah, I can, because this is my Zoom meeting here. I made a meme that just, they look at each other all confused. And I captioned it, why does, when you're confused as to why your constituents don't want to die in a nuclear war. Here it is. I found it.
Okay, you want to share it?
Yes, I do. We don't really need the sound, so I'll just share the screen as a whole. And so when you're confused as to why your constituents don't want to die in a nuclear war, and then they give each other this look, like, what? Yeah. So, Elizabeth Warren is another one of these people who was supposedly so progressive, and then she kind of just folded on that and isn't progressive anymore. I don't.
It was more obviously an act in her case, because one thing, she's been playing Indian for 40 years, even though she's 100% white or 99.99% white.
She actually tried to do that?
She even co-authored a Native American cookbook back in the 80s, as if she were Native American. And she like put Native American on a I don't think it was on a job application. It was on like a
college application. Yeah.
It was a form for diversity at the university she was a professor at, or something like that. But yeah, she was a proud fake Native American.
Yeah, and I mean, and Ayanna Pressley too. Although Ayanna Pressley is interesting because she was pushed the other day by some other anti-war activists who are trying to get her on the Israel question. But she sorry, I just saw something funny. The look on her face that she had was just like annoyance, and what is that exactly? Why is it that they have disgust when they look at you? Here's my gripe with the progressives. What is it that they thought they could do when they got into power? And how did they think they were going to do that? Because I think by trying to figure that out, you can kind of see what went wrong. I think there's a lot of well-intentioned people who say, like, well, if I was just in power, I would do this. Mm-hmm. I would do that. Well, it's like, well, then how would you do that?
Yeah.
And I think it was at that point that they got kind of co-opted right there on the spot. The moment they won, they were told, okay, well, if you want to get something through to Congress, well, you're going to have to go to these people, and these people are terrible people. So you're going to have to play their game in order to get what you want passed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I do think it was really on the spot, if not before, because one of the things that AOC promised when she was running for office was, oh God, we're going to bring up Tulsi Gabbard now. Tulsi Gabbard had put forward the only climate change bill that's ever been put forward in Congress. It was like, renewable energy and, energy efficient buildings and so on and so forth. Really comprehensive bill. And AOC promised that she would support Gabbard's bill, which
bill was this again?
I don't remember the Off Fossil Fuels Act. Actually, I do remember the name of it. So yeah, if you just Google that, you can find it. So anyway, AOC promised that she would support it, that she would sign on as a co-sponsor as soon as she got in Congress. But instead, what she did was she put forward her own totally toothless resolution, the Green New Deal, or as you guys like to say, Green New Meal, Green New Deal. And, it was totally non-binding. It was just a resolution, and just totally ignored Gabbard's previous bill.
I think, Jeff, we're gonna have a lot of disagreement here on the Green New Deal.
Yeah.
And why? Because the problem with a lot of the climate change policies that are out right now, first of all take into account the axiom that a lot of climate change is fueled by mankind's intervention, right? Mm-hmm. That ever since the industrial era, carbon has shot up, skyrocketing. Okay, mm-hmm. Let's assume that is the case. Okay, even though I strongly disagree, it isn't. Mm-hmm. What is the point exactly that the Green New Deal is trying to make? By reducing energy needs and energy output, by lowering energy density and taking us away from fossil fuels, which, by the way, I am not a proponent of fossil fuels.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
By lowering the energy density, the only thing you're going to do is hurt people of poor communities. That's it.
Okay. So people just to clarify, you're saying, okay, you're not a proponent of fossil fuels, but you're also not a proponent of yanking the rug out from people whose only source of the energy they need right now is that.
Well, exactly. Yeah. I mean, the global green agenda that's being used and pushed in the World Economic Forum, the EU and places like that is they go to developing nations, places that don't have access to electricity 24/7 and say, listen, buddy, sorry, you can't have access to electricity 24/7. You can't have clean water because if you did, the world would blow up. So, but if you want to, we will invest through green means. We'll give you solar panels, we'll give you windmills, and that would be great and fine. But the problem is they don't provide you the energy output needed reliably or consistently or cheaply either, because you can't sustain an economy that way. It's like trying to run can you build up to a United States on windmills and solar panels? No, of course not. And so what? Babies have to be malnourished now because the world can't blow up. So
yeah. Well, I mean,
and if I could
we
just
should
quickly
probably
add,
explore this some other time, where we have more time to go into detail, because I know you have to leave in like 15 minutes.
Oh, sure, yeah.
But yeah, I think that I mean, yeah, there's certainly an issue of inequity there, where these energy hogs are telling poor countries, well, you can't develop unless you do it a certain way. That's a huge problem. So definitely agree there.
Just nuclear is the way to go.
Yeah, and if I could just
Possibly.
quickly say something though, there's not a problem, I think, with going green, but the problem is the so-called climate activists that say they're green are not doing that. I think you look at China's policy; they have a different conception of what green is than what people say it is. Greening deserts, for example, greening the Sahara Desert. That'd be a wonderful idea, and it would have a positive impact on the climate.
Yeah, they have the largest reforestation program in the world, by the way.
Yeah, and that's a great thing. Yeah. But I agree with Jose. We should be going towards higher energy sources. Nuclear power, nuclear fusion, which has been discussed. Which there's tremendous progress being done on that in the ITER program, for example. So we shouldn't be looking to reduce energy consumption, but increase it.
Yeah, I only bring this up because Bowman and AOC, I don't know if you saw this thread I had put out a while ago that said, like, sorry, I didn't go to leftist finishing school in response to AOC premiers. Yeah, right. I guess like that was her response to that we're LaRouche's and that we're Trump supporters, right-wing Trump supporters. And just to address it, like, I did vote for Trump twice. I don't care about it, People were going to, and at the time, I mean, I was young and stupid. What was I, like 18 when Trump, it was the first time I could vote. And, I didn't want to choose Hillary Clinton because I didn't want to, the current world events that are unfolding right now would have unfolded 4 years earlier had Hillary Clinton won. I mean, that's naturally where it was going. And then the second time was, Biden was already funding neo-Nazis when he was vice president in 2014. So I was like, well, I'm not going to vote for a Nazi. Now I see things differently, of course. I'm not going to vote for the lesser of two evils anymore. I'm going to vote for the person I think should be running the country, or whoever should be in the position of office, no matter how unpopular they are, no matter their likelihood of winning. I want to vote on principle now, and I don't care what that takes anymore, So I don't regret my votes because, I mean, look at where we are right now. But anyway.
Right. Yeah. I mean, she accuses you of guys of being right-wing Trumpers, which, I mean, I've looked at your social media posts and that's ridiculous. But I mean, you're right-wing Trumpers in the same sense that back in the early 90s when I voted for Clinton, I was a neoliberal Democrat. I was actually, a socialist at that time, who at that time still believed in the lesser evil crap. It wasn't that I liked Clinton, but at the time.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow. I mean, see, like that's where we are. But see, that's the thing. They're trying to kind of come after me and Kynan as a way to tell people, if you do this, we will scrutinize you too. the same way we scrutinize these guys. And so, you know, they're trying to scare people away and it's not working. People are just getting angry and seeing right through it. And hey, I mean, you know, I mean, Diane said this on the Duran today. I'm not saying this. She believes that because of our intervention, it had an effect on them putting this letter out. Because, you know, and she says, well, you know, they would never admit that, they being the people who put the letter out, that they would never admit that because then it would legitimize the power of the citizenry, right? That had such an effect that it could change policy. And I think that's also the other reason why they were told to retract the letter, because it would have added legitimacy to citizenry who are concerned about the Ukrainian war. And, you know, even if you see this letter as just like a simple vote grab, right? Because the elections are 12 days away or so, right? Even if you see it as that, they were trying to go for the anti-war vote. They couldn't even do that right because they retracted it. And so they just look bad on all fronts.
Yeah.
And,
and here's their, wait, is this? Oh no!
Yeah. Oh yeah. The poor staffer. The poor staffer who got thrown under the bus. I think Ro Khanna actually exposed like who it was or something, because Ro Khanna said like, "Listen, my condolences to this person. You know, I want everyone to know they're a great guy and that." And it's like, Jesus, Ro Khanna, you didn't have to come after me, you know.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, I'm just talking about my. I'm pretty sure he was talking about the guy who leaked the letter. But there's no way. See, this is bullshit too, because like there's no way you can just leak a letter like that or publish a letter like that without asking people. This is more than just like a one-step thing. One, it's putting it on the website, putting it on social media, right? Getting other congressmen to retweet it and sign off it, right? That's not a one-person thing, right? This wasn't some rogue staffer who's just like, you know, I want peace and I'm going to put this out there. No. You know, this thing was like, we're going to put this out. They got spanked hard. And then they said, you know what, we can't do this anymore.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, they're saying that it happened and that the letter was written in July, which, you know, I find that a little hard to believe because they were talking about events in September. They mentioned the referenda at one point, I believe. Yeah, but I do think you're right that it took a little while for them to like, you know, have everybody vet it. So let's see.
Yeah, of course. You know, they were saying that somebody said this was written back in August, and then another congressman said, nah, this was drafted back in June. And then Ilhan Omar, Aaron Matei talked about this. Ilhan Omar put out a tweet saying like, well, you know, letters like these, you know, they have to be well timed because, you know, we were writing this based off intel that we were getting at the time. It's like, oh, well, what was the intel? You know?
Yeah.
So, you know, they didn't share that intel. So it's like, well, what was going on in June and or August that you decided to make diplomatic calls for diplomacy? So, yeah.
Yeah. So just for the record, you guys are not, let's see, where am I? You guys are not right-wing Trumpers. You're not cult members.
No.
You're not fake anti-war protesters, as Kyle Kulinski called you.
And Kyle Kulinski's a butt, man. He's mean, but yeah. I still love him, not because I like his content. I love him as a human being. I think his content is terrible, but I still love him, you know?
Yeah. Oh, and that, could you comment about the thing where she claimed that you were yelling over a deaf constituent? I thought that was
hilarious. Yeah. Go ahead, Kynan.
Yeah, so what had actually happened was there was no constituent who was asking any question. The moderator was reading a question from an email that they had received. And maybe the person asking was deaf or not. I don't know. But it was something about, you know, how can AOC help people with disability? And only after we intervened did she say, oh, you're interrupting someone who's deaf. but there was no one in the audience who was deaf. And Jimmy Dore even made a funny comment about it as when he covered our segment. He's like, well, how would that even work? How would the deaf person even know that there's someone screaming?
Exactly.
They just keep talking, or signing, whatever they're doing. Yeah.
Absurd. Yeah. So that's just the way of her, lying and detracting from what we said.
Yeah, exactly. So anything else for us, Jeff?
Well, I also wanted to ask you about how, there's this, I don't know how much of it you've seen, but there's this faction of the actual left who are actually against what's going on in Ukraine. People like Ben Norton and, a whole bunch of others who have attacked you guys in a similar way to how AOC did. They've made a huge deal out of the fact that you brought up Tulsi Gabbard when, you just mentioned in passing the fact that she had, not that it wasn't important, but you mentioned, she had left the Democratic Party largely because of, her having the same position about the warmongering Democratic leadership that was supporting the Ukraine war that you guys did. And that was the reason why you brought it up. But so Ben Norton, I don't know if you watch his show, but I saw the live stream he did where he talked about in part you guys' protests. But he said at one point he had blocked you, Jose, which it turns out you guys had never even interacted with each other, but he had blocked you on Twitter and described you and Kynan as belonging to a fascist cult that is, quote, very pro-Trump. And said yours and Gabbard's anti-war sentiments are insincere, and that you guys were trying to recruit people for fascism.
Yes. Because we stood up and said afterwards, you need to join us here where we are at our politics, AOC, and everybody else needs to. I don't care what people think of me. Really, I don't. I don't care if people credit us or don't. I think Kynan agrees here, our end goal is to get other people to do it. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're some robe-wearing giant afro guy, who runs around with a plastic samurai sword. You need to stand up. That's all I care about,
Yeah. And we should be building a coalition of people from all different kinds of backgrounds. They could be socialists, they could be Trumpers, whoever they are. If they're against this war, they need to be speaking out because this is the most important issue now. And for Ben Norton to be like, oh, well, they don't agree with me, so their points are invalid. It's ridiculous. Come on, we're trying to avert war here. Let's not, get into this.
Yeah, exactly. And oddly enough, it seems like the Ukrainian government recognizes the importance of what this diverse group of people who are against this war have in common, because they have this hit list where they have, people ranging from Diane Sayre to Tulsi Gabbard to Scott Ritter to Ava Bartlett and, all these other people who are enormously diverse in terms of their politics. I think what's his name, Colonel McGregor might be on there, Douglas McGregor. So do you really think that all these people are insincere in their opposition to the war? I don't think so.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. And I'll just say this on like the Ben Norton stuff and people who are coming at me who are supposedly against the war but love to scrutinize other so-called non-leftists or leftists. It's just impotence. It's just pure impotence to think that, there's the inability to do something of substance or real change. And the only thing you can do is lash out at people who are trying to do something real. That's all that is. And that's why I don't really pay much attention to it because it's like, you're coming at me. Okay, fine. You can say whatever you want about me, but you're the coward because you're not the one who's standing up against people like AOC. Why don't you go do something like what we did and show me? Your politics clearly are better than mine. Okay, if that's the case, then what are you so afraid of then?
Yeah.
Go do.
Well, to be fair to Ben, he lives in Nicaragua, so
Well,
who he'd protest there. But yeah, definitely, like how is this helping to lash out at people who, and I mean, although I didn't really, support her per se, because I just don't support Democrats, I spent a lot of time looking into Tulsi Gabbard's background and record when she was running for Congress, and spent a lot of time defending her because the attacks against her were just, insane. And if you look at her actual record, basically she voted and took, public positions as basically sort of a liberal Democrat who also happened to be very consistently, for the most part, against U.S. Foreign policy, regime change wars, and all that. And I certainly have my problems with her politics, but the negative reaction to her is all out of proportion to the extent to which those of us on the left ought to be reacting negatively to it, given the context that she's been consistently against the Ukraine war, consistently against U.S. intervention just about everywhere, because she called out Russiagate for the bullshit that it was. She supported freedom for Assange, and it's like, come on, guys, give her a little credit. And basically, I think what's happened is, because as the 30 so-called progressives found out the other day, criticizing U.S. foreign policy is such a third rail, especially if you're in a prominent position, that well, just like what happened with Jeremy Corbyn in the UK, this entire smear campaign that had nothing to do with reality was manufactured, because even though she's kind of a mainstream liberal who also is anti-interventionist, that was too much for them. They couldn't accept that, so they concocted this whole smear campaign.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, listen, Jeff, this was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thanks for having us on your show, The Bitter Pill.
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad we could do it. And definitely like to talk to you guys some more sometime. And
just reach out. Hey, maybe whenever we do another intervention, another viral intervention, you can feel free to ask us again, how we did that. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Thank you. Your article was really well written, Jeff, by the way.
Oh,
thanks for that. Yeah, it was really great.
Thanks. And like I said, I've got a whole bunch of other ones, and I've got this YouTube channel and so forth. So, I'm trying to slowly build it up, but still hasn't quite caught on. So, maybe this will help.
Okay.
I think it will. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds good. All right, Jeff.
All right. Okay, take care, guys. We'll talk to you soon.